Hello and welcome to this special edition here. I am Mary von Ohlen. I'm here with Rebecca Karchere, and we're both going to interview our friend and colleague Alison Held. Alison recently contributed to this wonderful book, Heart and Soul. If you can see it here, we'll put a link below. Living a love-filled, spirit-guided, consciously created life. Her chapter focuses on her own experiences and work with clients in discovering what's the true cause and how to resolve food sensitivities, food allergies. So we're going to focus on that today because that's a hot topic, and I think a lot of people can benefit from Alison's experience and wisdom with that. Before we go any further, Alison, would you just introduce yourself a little bit? Tell us a little bit about your background, about your practice. I can tell you all that I've known Alison for many years, and she is a skilled, caring, intuitive practitioner with a clinical nutrition background and a whole host of energy healing studies and accomplishments. I'll let you go into more detail, Alison.
Great. Well, thank you, Mary and Rebecca, for having me. And my name is Alison Anderson. My practice is called Healthful Direction. I work with about 90% of my clients online, but I am based in Connecticut. And I started out as a nutritionist. I trained as a health coach and then moved into more of a clinical approach and have my master's in nutrition just like Rebecca. And just like Mary and Rebecca, I moved and transitioned into more of a esoteric, spiritual, emotional journey with my work with clients versus a clinical, scientific kind of model. Although science isn't everything too, so we can't negate any of it. So with my clients, I help them break through their barriers, and it started out more of a nutritional side of things where people were looking to lose weight and wanting to break through things that way, but then everything's interconnected. So people would come in with relationship issues, money issues, wanting to buy their dream house. So it's a host of different things that I work with, but most people walk in the door with a health issue, health complaint, or want to work on their food sensitivities.
That's fantastic. First of all, I want to apologize and realize that we go so far back that my brain defaults to your maiden name, Alison Anderson. I think I said your maiden name when I introduced you. I apologize for that. I know better. Great overview and introduction, Alison. And you kind of got right into, I think, one of the first questions we had for you. Maybe you could elaborate on, like Alison, like Rebecca and I, Alison did transition from originally focusing, like you said, more on the physical modalities, the physical causes and approaches to health and healing, and over time have shifted to more of the emotional and spiritual principles, approaches, and perspective, as have we. And I was just curious if you could elaborate on what kind of sparked that shift for you, or what was that journey into this realm like for you?
Sure. I went down a track that I think was more of, you're supposed to do this. You're supposed to get your master's degree. You're supposed to get follow the scientific pathway. And in my heart, I kept getting pulled in another direction, and I had to listen to that. So when I was working with clients, I had two different sides of my practice. I had one side where people would walk in the door and want a diet. They'd want to know what to eat, what not to eat, what supplements to take. And I had that side of the practice. But there was a part of me that had a lot of curiosity and introduced some energy healing. I was trained first in emotional freedom techniques, which I know Mary and Rebecca are both familiar with and use as well. And that woke me up to the potential of what's possible with shifting energy for people. And I had this other side of my practice where people would find me on the EFT websites, because I've been practicing EFT for so long. I was one of the first practitioners, I think, listed on some of these websites. And so I'd get random calls for people that wanted an EFT practitioner. So I'd make space for that in my practice. And I started noticing that those clients were getting results in a different way than the people that were pure physical prescription kind of clients. And I also noticed that my heart, like I said, my heartstrings were pulled. I started noticing that I was much more passionate with those clients. I was enjoying the work so much better. And I moved into doing a lot of my own healing because of it, because of my interest. So I worked on my own stuff. And as that started to evolve, I was brought into more of the emotional side. So leaving behind the pure scientific nutrition clients and shifting fully over to the more integrated approach.
That's fantastic. What type of things did you notice? You said that, you noticed that your clients were getting a different type of result, the ones that were focusing on the energy healing modalities.
Faster results, I'll say. A lot of self-sabotage happens for everybody, right? We all experience ourselves beating ourselves up, maybe taking 2 steps backwards. But it seemed like the energetic clients were moving forward at a different rate. More was popping in, more was there to heal, where the physical clients, the ones that were just following a diet or a supplement plan, were kind of banging their heads. Oh, I tried this already, I'll try it again. It was a lot of willpower that was being used versus flowing with the energy. And in my own personal experience, one of the other aspects that brought me into this work was my severe testing anxiety in graduate school. And so I sought out an energetic practitioner to work on this. And my test taking improved dramatically. When I was in elementary school, I had issues. So this goes way back. And it really surfaced in graduate school. And once I worked through the fears, the anxiety, the beliefs that I had, the emotional disturbances that were going on, I was a completely different test taker. I could write my name at the top of a test and not be shaking and, sweating, sweat pouring down my face. And so that's sort of I noticed the physical thing inside of me. And a lot of clients, as you know from working with clients, notice that physical internal shift that's happening with this kind of work.
Yeah, well put. Rebecca, I know that's been your experience as well.
Yes. I'm fixated on this next question because so you kind of that flows into the next question that Mary put, like you wrote in your book, how we do food is how we do life. And so I found the same thing in my practice with, you can give somebody a diet, you can tell them to take these supplements, but unless you get between their ears, they're eventually going to fall back to their old habits. And that, it's not a true healing, right? So can you elaborate on that phrase, how we do food is how we do life? Because to me, it's just a symptom or a microcosm of a bigger picture, right? That you were noticing, and that's why you went into emotional and psychological tools, because it's really not my feeling is, and I think you both agree, it's never really about the food to begin with.
Absolutely. And as I'll share later, some examples with clients, it's like someone comes in constantly blaming the food. Oh, it must be the nuts, or it must be the gluten. And when we look a little deeper, it's actually father issues, it's mother issues, it's self-forgiveness, it's trauma. Right. So it's amazing how, I think because food is so much a part of our conversations, it's so much a part of our life. We're eating at least 3 times a day. And there's thousands upon thousands of diet books out there. So it's just in our face constantly. And there's this pressure to be thin, to be, to feel healthy. And but in terms of how we do food, how we do life, our society is one of busyness. We must do. It's not really about the being, and it should be more about the being with ourselves and being okay with that. And food can be a distraction. It can be a numbing tool. It can be something that we rush through to get to the next thing. And if we're not present to our food, we're probably not present to ourselves. And if we're limited with our food, if we're avoiding foods and constantly going on cleanses and elimination diets, we're probably avoiding something else in our life. Or we're not having an expansive mindset with our life.
Yeah. I'm so glad you've gotten into the to see this full circle. I mean, personally, I just love it. And what you wrote in your book that you were actually, you don't even call yourself a nutritionist anymore. Am I hearing that right?
Well, you know, I was for a while when I was making the transition, and I was still getting phone calls for, oh, I want to work with you. I've worked with every other practitioner, and you must be the nutritionist. And I've had to do a lot of explaining that, yes, I'm a nutritionist, but I go beyond the food. And so I still use the term. It's still a credential. I think, though, we're all beyond our credentials now. We sort of stand for things, and that's what it's more about than the credential. So I have a lot of different titles that I intermix. I call myself the Healing Within Illuminator, because I'm helping to get that light to shine from within, which is already there. It's just about looking at the dark, being with the dark, and clearing some things that are in the pathway of the light. I call myself an energy catalyst, trying to move that energy in a very easy way, not with willpower, not with deprivation. So many different titles, but yes, my training in nutrition serves me well, I'd say, in this kind of work. There's a lot of biochemical pathways that are important when we're looking at food sensitivities. Sometimes there will be clients who are a little more tricky, and I'll go into hormonal charts or different biochemical words that the body needs to know in order to shift the energy. So it all makes sense. It all goes hand in hand. There's no separation at all.
Nice. So I have one question I'm eager to ask you. So you also mentioned that you were, like, I guess we'll say a gluten-free educator, right? Like that you were, you know, I remember hearing or noticing you're doing talks and whatnot, specifically about gluten. And I never really focused on it all that much. So I'm curious what you've discovered as to what is the whole gluten craze about. Is there any validity to it on a biochemical level or a psychological level? I mean, what's your summation? I really am curious.
So I was pulled to work with gluten early on in my career because I was trained in more of a Paleolithic kind of approach, which is the avoidance of a lot of grains, and which includes the gluten. But I also noticed from my own cleanses and elimination that I did a lot better without the gluten. So I was studying it for myself, for my clients. I was telling all of my clients to get off the gluten, or at least to try getting off of it and see how they do. And I still recommend that for people because it's awareness, right? We're all at different levels of consciousness, and food does play a significant role in our lives. And sometimes we do need to avoid a food to understand what the reaction is, how we're feeling without it, how we're feeling with it. So I studied a lot about gluten. I gave talks about gluten, as you said, and I was an advocate of avoiding it. But I also noticed along the way that it was a little fear-based because myself was fearful and we're all a mirror for each other. And so as I started to discover that I could heal these food sensitivities, I worked with myself first on the gluten intolerances. And I do not recall exactly what was at my root of healing this. It could have been forgiveness stuff. It could have been beliefs around what I learned, because that could have been kind of indoctrined into my mindset. But I used to have severe mood reactions when I had gluten, and it was significant, where I just wouldn't feel good for days. And now I have a fair amount of gluten in my diet, and my mood is very steady. And
Wow.
so I've noticed that for me, this works. And the kinds of clients that I work with are the ones that are open-minded, that have been in a situation like mine, where they've been in an avoidance role. They're sick of it. They want more freedom with their food. They understand that, yes, life is beyond food. We're getting so micro-focused on food is not healthy.
Right.
So because they're open to it, because they're walking in the door knowing, you know, they have all these struggles, there's something to be said about that. So they do notice the shifts. On a biochemical level, I personally feel that there's a lot of hysteria with gluten. There's a lot of people on this bandwagon of avoiding gluten, which I was part of. I jumped off the bandwagon. And unfortunately, it's created this consciousness model that's sort of, you know, avoid it, it's fear-based, it's bad, it causes inflammation. And so I think there's this, you know, emotional belief level that's going on as well. Yes, the soil is not as great as it used to be. We've got Monsanto that we're dealing with. We have processing issues, cross-contamination issues. With all that said, we're also raising consciousness, and we're needing to come into a place of adaptation, where survival of the fittest, right? So if we're living in fear, if we're living in, oh my gosh, what is this doing to me with every mouthful, which a lot of people have. You know, I look at people's grocery carts in the grocery store, and I'm like, how can they survive on celery juice? And that's it. What's going on here? It's all good, but it gets extreme for some people. And that's not adaptation for me. And again, there's more beyond food. There's healthy relationships. There's living in community. There is love. There's self-care. There's so much. So, the stress reactions, I think, are bigger than gluten itself.
I am so excited. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That was awesome.
Fantastic.
All right. I'll pass it on to Mary, but I really appreciate that perspective. And I know we could chat for hours, but, but that was good.
It's a fantastic summary of the broad issue going on.
Yeah.
So now to go from the broad to, you know, more the microcosm, or you can look at more specific examples, because I know our viewers, people resonate with stories and specific examples. And so people might be watching and saying, but so, you know, Alison has healed her own food sensitivities and those of her clients. How does that work? What does that look like? How long does it take? That type of thing. Maybe give an example or two.
So I use muscle testing like both of you do, which I'm sure you've covered in one of your other videos, but it's a way to access the body, to give the body different answers, or have the practitioner, give the practitioner different answers and the client. And so with that said, there's also a lot of intuition that I use, a lot of my previous studies that I've used around gluten. So a client will walk in the door sharing what's going on, their symptoms, and things will just pop in. So for an example, I had a client who in 3 sessions cured her sensitivity to gluten and corn, and I believe there were some other foods as well. She had some testing done, and she had antibodies to the gluten. So there was scientific proof in this blood work that something was reacting. She was one of those individuals who would go to a restaurant, order everything gluten-free, and still have a reaction because of cross-contamination. Not always, but specific examples where this had happened, where she would think that she did very good, quote good, and then she'd walk out and have something for a couple of days later. I can't exactly remember what it was, but I think it was digestive related, headaches, achiness, different mood symptoms. So it hits us all in different ways, but she really got the full dose of it. So we worked through a lot of different things. We worked in 3 sessions, and each session we worked with gluten. We worked on other things too. So what came up for her with gluten was forgiveness of self. She needed to forgive herself that she was making such a big deal out of gluten. That was one of the things that we worked on. Something else that came up was that she had a tremendous fear of sickness. And so this fear, what we fear, often becomes more in our face, right? What we resist persists. So what we fear persists. And she, it's almost like this self-creation that was happening because of this great fear of sickness. So we worked on the fear of sickness and releasing that. There was also something we worked on that I find interesting, was this belonging. She had been part of a spiritual community and I'm not quite sure I think she's practices Buddhism, and she felt isolated from this community and had to leave the community. And this was significant in her life. It was a significant part of her life. And she started realizing during one of our sessions that she had a lot of isolation going on. And being gluten-free can create isolation because of the avoidance, because of not wanting to go to certain events because there might not be gluten-free foods, going to only certain restaurants because they might not serve gluten-free products at other restaurants. So we worked on belonging. So there were a lot of different things that we worked on. And so in these 3 sessions, she actually went on to get trained in some of the work that I do. And she which is so inspirational for me, and that's amazing and wonderful. And she went and had her blood work done again and showed 0 antibodies. So there you go, scientific proof. A lot of my clients don't go and have the blood work done, or they don't have the previous blood work. They just know how they feel. So to have that was a nice testament that this is real. We have solid evidence.
Wow.
Fantastic.
I love that story. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I love when there's that objective data, for any naysayers. Say, see, pre and post, and here's what we did in between, and there's nothing else that you can attribute it to, but that really, to your work. Awesome. That's fantastic. And of course we know every single client, every individual is unique. And so that, you've got everyone's got their own history and belief systems and traumas and different things that have influenced them. But I'm always curious. I'm always looking for patterns, Have you seen any kind of general or specific patterns emerge in all the clients you've worked with food sensitivities? Is there always perhaps, like you mentioned, the belonging piece that might have been unique to that client, but is there something that you've found that comes up more times than not?
I think there's certain beliefs around foods. In the nutritional world, we're trained that gluten is bad, that dairy can be inflammatory or bad. So some of the bigger, more common food sensitivities, there's this ingrained belief system that we've got to break through. So sometimes there's just a general, or often I would say probably 9.5 out of 10 of my clients that have the belief that food is, there's certain foods that aren't nourishing, and that alone can cause the fear, cause the stress. Like I said earlier, forgiveness is a big thing. So there might be a connection. Sometimes there's a connection. A lot of times there's a connection with trauma. So there may be a food that someone had when they were little and something happened, an argument in the household, and in the process of digestion and the process of consuming that food and just the trauma that was wrapped into it, it creates this bondage and this link that we just have to break the bondage. And it's as simple as that. It's just finding where was that original time where the body just created this connection between a food and a stressful situation. So that can also happen. Or, food, when I think of apple pie, I think of my mom and cooking apple pies on Sundays for family dinner. It was a special event. And so we all have these special ties to food, and some of them are beautiful and wonderful, and we should, continue honoring them. And some of them aren't so good. So we just got to kind of take a look at our baggage, so to speak, and see what's from the past in loving eyes. So those are some of the big things. Traumas, I would say, are a big part of looking at food sensitivities.
Yeah, I mean, it makes total sense to us because we work in this realm, right? But for people hearing about this for the first time, this is a great discussion because you're really summing up, the key points and the key concepts for people to open up to realize that all of this stuff is healable. It's all things that there are all things that you can resolve. It's just a matter of, like you said, illuminating where did the trauma, where did those links occur, and clearing them and shifting the beliefs. It's incredible what our system can do.
And the other thing that I've noticed, you asked how many sessions does it take for a client to overcome a food sensitivity? And this really depends on the individual. I believe in divine timing. I believe that things are a journey. For a long time, I was always, kind of blaming food. And and then I started to realize, wait, it's not the food. So sometimes with a client, we'll heal the gluten stuff, but they'll keep coming back to a session and say, I think it's still gluten. I think it's still gluten. And it's not, it's something else. So it's just about being curious and open and knowing and trusting that it's a journey and not a destination. And sometimes there's varying layers that we need to uncover. So sometimes it's a session, sometimes it's 3 sessions, sometimes it's a little bit longer.
Makes sense. Yeah.
This was enlightening.
Yeah, I had one last question, if you have time. And Rebecca touched on it earlier when she brought up, what you discussed in your contribution to the book about, that mirroring concept. And I know that you shared a little bit about your own experience and when you healed your own relationships to food and food sensitivities, that you noticed other changes in your life. And I wondered if you could elaborate a little bit on that, either in your own experience or with clients, how, when they resolve that issue with the food relationship, how then that seems to mirror and create other changes in their life.
I mean, I think the biggest change for a lot of people is freedom. It creates the ability to go anywhere, not to question what they're doing. So that one client with the antibodies, she was so thrilled because she was going away on a training and she said, oh my gosh, I could run in and grab a slice of pizza and not really worry too much. Now she's not eating pizza every day. It's not that I'm instructing people to eat donuts. It's just that it allows for this sense of freedom, which is so important. That's what life is all about, living it to the fullest. And that doesn't mean gorging on a slice, a big box of pizza. Again, it's about nourishing ourselves in many different ways beyond food. So there's that. I attribute part of healing my food sensitivities to meeting my husband, because I started to expand my awareness. It just was very synchronistic, as I mentioned in the book, that shortly after I decided to incorporate gluten back into my life and heal, I realized that everything was kind of working well. I could make it a part of my meals. I met my husband, and I just think there's no real coincidences. It just is so amazing that for years I was looking for the man of my dreams, and the fact that I did all this inner work and then he shows up, it was meant to be. It was really meant to be. Now there's other things that I did. It's not just the food sensitivities. I did a lot of belief around being worthy and drawing that person in and being fully aligned with that goal of having this person in my life. So, but the sensitivities was a part of it. It was part of my journey, and it's so nice to be able to share incredible meals with him and not have to say, if he's cooking, I don't have to say, leave that out. It's terrible, which would drive him crazy probably. But he's also very supportive, as I mentioned in the book. So if I ever did decide that I wanted to do an elimination diet, he'd be fully on board with me doing that. So it's it's just about having flexibility in our lives and that freedom.
Yeah, another word, I love that word, freedom. Another word would be just power, right? You got your power back in a sense.
Absolutely, absolutely. The power is huge. And the self-forgiveness, you know, not beating yourself up over everything you're doing, which is empowering.
Yeah,
absolutely. This has been great. Thank you so much for coming on today to enlighten people on this topic and on the great work that you're doing. We'll put your contact information in the description below the video, but what's the best way, would you say, Alison, for people to get in touch with you if they want to work with you?
I would say through my website. So just going to healthfuldirection.com, which will be listed on the YouTube video in the notes, and clicking on contact, and you'll find me there. You can read more about my work with clients on my website, and I'm always available to answer any questions as well. So if you watch this video and still have some confusion or are curious what it can do for you, because I know we're all unique and have various different situations, I'd be happy to answer those as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This was awesome.
Thanks for having me. This was wonderful.
I'll have to do it again another time. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe to our channels if you haven't already.